The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a scream in the darkness. Its red pulse traveled across star systems, reaching every civilized world in the Galactic Federation. The message was simple but terrifying. Mayday, Mayday. This is Colony Ship Serenity 7. We are under attack by unknown forces. All Federation vessels, please respond. We have civilians aboard. Please help us. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Thunderbolt, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the distress signal's origin. Around her, the bridge hummed with activity as her crew worked to analyze the transmission. The signal came from a Zirian system, a remote cluster of planets on the edge of Federation space. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from across the sector," Communications Officer Torres called out. Every Federation ship within range received the same message. The Altarian fleet is responding, along with vessels from the Zentari Coalition and the Crystalline Collective. Shin nodded, her jaw tight. The human Armada had been patrolling this sector for 3 months, keeping the peace and protecting trade routes. Humanity was still the newest member of the Galactic Federation, having joined only 15 years ago. Many alien species still viewed humans with suspicion, considering them too aggressive, too unpredictable. "What's our distance to Zirian?" Chen asked. 47 light years, Captain, replied Navigation Officer Kim. "At maximum warp, we could be there in 18 hours. The Altarian vessels are closer," Torres added. "They'll reach the system in 12 hours. Chen walked to the front of the bridge, staring out at the star field ahead. The Altarians were known as peacekeepers, their ships designed for defense and rescue operations. The Zentari were traders, their vessels fast but lightly armed. The Crystalline Collective had powerful energy weapons, but moved slowly through space. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from Admiral Harrison aboard the UES Leviathan," Torres announced. The holographic display flickered, showing the weathered face of Admiral Marcus Harrison. Behind him, Chun could see the massive command bridge of the Leviathan, the flagship of the human Armada's Third Fleet. "Captain Chun, I'm sure you've received the distress signal," Harrison said without preamble. "I'm ordering the immediate deployment of Task Force 7 to the Zirian system. You'll be leading the advanced squadron." "Understood, Admiral. What do we know about the attackers?" Harrison's expression darkened. "Nothing good. The last transmission from Serenity 7 mentioned ships of unknown design, using weapons that punch through Federation shields like paper. The attacking vessels appear to be using some kind of energy weapon we've never encountered before." Chun felt a chill run down her spine. In her 20 years of service, first in Earth's Navy and then in the human Armada, she had faced pirates, terrorists, and hostile alien species. But an unknown enemy with superior technology was something entirely different. "Admiral, are we certain the other Federation fleets can handle this threat?" Harrison paused, his eyes meeting Chen's through the holographic display. "Captain, between you and me, I have my doubts. The Altarians are good people, but their ships are built for peace. The Zentari are merchants, not warriors. The Crystalline Collective has firepower, but they think in terms of centuries, not minutes. And humans think in terms of seconds," Chen finished. "Exactly. That's why I'm sending our fastest ships ahead. If this enemy is as dangerous as the reports suggest, those civilian refugees are going to need someone who can think fast and hit hard." The transmission ended, and Chun turned to address her bridge crew. These were some of the finest officers in the human Armada, men and women who had proven themselves in countless situations. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez at the weapons station, a former Marine who could calculate firing solutions in his head. Ensign Park at the helm, a pilot who could thread a needle while traveling at warp speed. Chief Engineer Okafor, whose modifications had made the Thunderbolt one of the fastest ships in the fleet. "You heard the Admiral," Chen said. "We're going into unknown waters against an enemy with unknown capabilities. Our job is to reach those civilians and get them to safety, no matter what's waiting for us." "Captain," Rodriguez spoke up, "what about the other Federation fleets? Will we be coordinating with them?" Chen considered the question. Human military doctrine emphasized speed, flexibility, and overwhelming force. The other species in the Federation had their own approaches to warfare, often based on their unique biology and cultural backgrounds. Coordinating with multiple fleets during a crisis could slow down response times. We'll maintain communication with the other fleets, but we won't wait for them, she decided. Human ships move fast and strike hard. If we wait for a committee to form and strategies to be debated, those civilians will be dead. The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this. They all knew the reputation humans had among the other species. Too violent, too quick to fight, too willing to take risks. But they also knew that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. Torres sent a message to all ships in Task Force 7. Chun ordered. We launch in 30 minutes. Maximum warp to Zirian system. Battle conditions throughout the journey. Aye, Captain. Kim, plot the fastest course to Zirian. I don't care if we have to fly through 3 black holes and a supernova. Find me the quickest route. Already on it, Captain. Rodriguez, I want all weapon systems checked and double-checked. Whatever we're facing out there, they're not going to catch us unprepared. You got it, Captain. As her crew rushed to execute her orders, Chen walked to her command chair and activated her personal terminal. She pulled up the files on Serenity 7, studying the colony ship's specifications and passenger manifest. 15,000 civilians from a dozen different species, fleeing a war-torn system to start new lives in Federation space. The ship itself was a massive vessel, nearly 5 kilometers long, designed to carry entire communities across vast distances. It was equipped with basic defensive systems, but nothing that could stand up to a military assault. The civilians aboard were scientists, farmers, teachers, children, people who had already lost one home and now faced the prospect of losing everything again. Chen's hands tightened on her chair's armrests. As a human, she understood something that many of her Federation allies didn't seem to grasp. Sometimes, evil existed in the universe. Sometimes, there were beings who chose destruction over creation, who preferred to take rather than build. When faced with such enemies, the only response was to meet them with equal force. Captain, Task Force 7 is assembled and ready for departure, Torres reported. Chen looked at the tactical display, showing the 7 ships under her command. The Thunderbolt led the formation, flanked by 2 destroyers, the Phoenix and the Scorpion. Behind them came the heavy cruiser Defiance, and bringing up the rear were 3 frigates, the Falcon, the Eagle, and the Hawk. Each ship represented the pinnacle of human military engineering, incorporating lessons learned from centuries of warfare on Earth and adapted for combat in space. They were fast, heavily armed, and crewed by men and women who had volunteered to stand between civilization and the darkness. All ships, this is Captain Chun, she announced over the fleet communication channel. We're heading into a situation where we don't know the enemy's capabilities or intentions. What we do know is that 15,000 innocent people are depending on us to reach them before it's too late. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew, seeing the determination in their eyes. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. Watch each other's backs. We've faced impossible odds before, and we've always found a way to win. Today will be no different. All ships report ready for departure, Captain, Kim announced. Chin settled into her command chair and took a deep breath. In 18 hours, they would reach the Zirian system and discover what awaited them there. Whether it was pirates, an invasion force, or something else entirely, the human armada would be ready. Take us out in Sign Park. Maximum warp. The stars stretched into lines of light as the Thunderbolt and her escorts jumped to warp speed, racing across the galaxy toward an unknown enemy and an uncertain fate. Behind them, the rest of the human armada's 3rd fleet prepared to follow, while across Federation space, alien fleets began their own journey to the crisis zone. But the humans would arrive first. They always did. 16 hours into their journey, the Thunderbolt's sensors detected something that made Captain Chen's blood run cold. Long-range scanners picked up massive energy signatures from the direction of the Zirian system, accompanied by debris fields that could only mean one thing. A battle was already underway. Captain, I'm reading multiple ship signatures in the Zirian system, Sensor Officer Walsh reported from her station. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's happening out there, it's big. Chun moved to the sensor station, studying the readouts with growing concern. The patterns on the screen showed the distinctive energy signatures of Altarian vessels, their powerful shields designed for defense. But there were other readings, too. Unfamiliar energy patterns that seemed to pulse and shift in ways she had never seen before. "How long until we reach the system?" she asked. 2 hours, 17 minutes at current speed, Kim replied for navigation. "Can we go faster?" Chief Engineer Okafor's voice came through the comm system from engineering. "Captain, I can give you another 0.2 on the warp drive, but we'll be pushing the engines beyond recommended parameters." "Do it, and send the same modification instructions to the rest of the fleet." As the ships accelerated even faster toward their destination, Chen opened a communication channel to Admiral Harrison aboard the Leviathan. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, and Chun could see the tension in his features. "Admiral, we're detecting battle signatures from Zirian. It looks like the Altarian fleet has already engaged the enemy." Harrison nodded grimly. "We're seeing the same readings from here. I've been in contact with Admiral Thyros of the Altarian fleet. They arrived at Zirian 3 hours ago and immediately came under attack. They're reporting heavy casualties." "What's the status of the colony's ship?" "Unknown. The last transmission from Serenity 7 was 8 hours ago. Admiral Thyros is trying to reach them, but the enemy has set up some kind of interference field around the system." Chen studied the Admiral's expression. Harrison was a veteran of dozens of conflicts, a man who had seen the worst that the galaxy could offer. If he was worried, then the situation was truly dire. "Admiral, what are your orders?" "Captain, I want you to be very careful when you reach that system. The Altarians are reporting that the enemy ships are using weapons technology that seems to adapt to whatever they're facing. Their shields and armor are becoming less effective with each exchange." Chun felt a chill of recognition. She had read reports of such technology in theoretical papers, weapons systems that could analyze and counter any defense thrown against them. But those were just theories, ideas that existed only in the minds of scientists and engineers. "Sir, are we talking about adaptive technology?" "That's what it looks like. The enemy ships start each engagement at a disadvantage, but they quickly adapt to whatever weapons are used against them. The Altarians hit them hard in the first few minutes, but now their weapons are barely scratching the enemy hulls." Chen's mind raced through the implications. If the enemy could adapt to any attack, then conventional tactics would be useless. The longer a battle went on, the stronger the enemy would become. It was a nightmare scenario for any military commander. "Admiral, do we have any intelligence on these ships? Where they came from? What species is operating them?" Harrison shook his head. "Nothing. They appeared in the system without warning, no identification, no communication attempts. They ignored all attempts at peaceful contact and went straight for the colony's ship." The communication ended, and Chun stood in the center of her bridge, thinking furiously. Adaptive technology meant that whatever approach they took, it would only work once. After that, the enemy would be ready for it. Traditional military doctrine called for probing attacks, testing enemy defenses before committing to a full assault. But in this case, such tactics would only make the enemy stronger. "Rodriguez," she called her weapons officer, "I want you to run simulations on something. If we're facing adaptive technology, what's our best option for a single decisive strike?" Rodriguez looked up from his console, his face thoughtful. "Captain, if the enemy adapts to whatever we throw at them, then we need to hit them with everything we have in the first few seconds. No warning, no preliminary attacks. Full power from the moment we enter the system." "Exactly what I was thinking. Can our ships coordinate a simultaneous strike from multiple vectors?" "Absolutely. We've drilled the formation dozens of times. The entire task force can focus fire on a single target and deliver a coordinated alpha strike." She nodded, but she knew that even their best efforts might not be enough. Human ships were fast and heavily armed, but if the enemy technology was truly adaptive, they would need something more than conventional tactics. "Torres, send a message to all ships in the task force. I want Captain's conference in 1 hour. We're going to need every tactical advantage we can get." An hour later, The holographic images of 6 ship captains appeared on the Thunderbolt's bridge. Captain Williams of the Phoenix, a former fighter pilot with ice water in her veins. Captain Kumar of the Scorpion, an expert in electronic warfare. Captain Brooks of the Defiance, whose heavy cruiser packed the most firepower in the fleet. The 3 frigate captains, each commanding smaller but incredibly agile ships. Ladies and gentlemen, Chen began, we're facing an enemy with adaptive technology. Everything we know about space combat suggests that our first attack will be our only chance to do serious damage. After that, they'll be ready for us. Captain Williams spoke first. Chen, I've been thinking about this. What if we don't give them time to adapt? What if we hit them so fast and so hard that they don't have a chance to analyze our attacks? Explain. My ship and the Scorpion are the fastest in the fleet. We could micro-jump into the system at different points, force the enemy to split their attention. While they're adapting to our attacks, the heavier ships could come in and finish them off. Captain Brooks shook his head. That's too risky, Williams. If the enemy adapts faster than we think, you'll be out there alone with no support. Brooks is right, Kumar added. But Williams has the right idea about speed. What if we use it differently? What if we attack so quickly that we're gone before they can lock onto us? Chin studied the tactical displays, her mind working through possibilities. The human approach to warfare had always emphasized speed and aggression, hitting the enemy where they were weakest and moving before they could respond. But this situation called for something even more extreme. I have an idea, she said finally. It's risky, and it goes against everything we've been taught about fleet tactics. But it might be our only chance. The other captains waited, knowing that whatever Chun was planning would be dangerous and probably insane. That was the human way. We're going to use the debris field, Chun announced. The wreckage from the Altarian ships. We micro-jump directly into the battle zone, using the debris as cover. The enemy won't expect an attack to come from the middle of their victims. Captain Brooks looked incredulous. Chun, that's suicide. We'd be jumping blind into a battlefield with zero room for error. Exactly, which is why they won't see it coming. We appear in the middle of the debris field, launch every weapon we have at point-blank range, then jump out before they can respond. Williams grinned. I like it. It's completely crazy, which means it's probably crazy enough to work. What about the colony ship? Kumar asked. If we're wrong about their location, we could hit civilian targets. Chen had already considered this. That's why we're going to split the attack. 3 ships attack the enemy fleet while 4 ships search for Serenity 7. If we can locate the colony ship, we extract them while the others keep the enemy busy. The conference continued for another 30 minutes as they refined the details of their attack plan. It was a strategy that no other species in the Federation would even consider. The Altarians would call it reckless. The Zentari would say it was insane. The Crystalline Collective would spend years analyzing whether it was even theoretically possible. But humans had been taking impossible risks for their entire history. It was what they did best. As the captains signed off and returned to their ships, Chan felt a familiar sensation in her stomach. It was the same feeling she had experienced before every major battle of her career, a mixture of fear and anticipation that told her she was about to face something that would test every limit of her abilities. Captain, we're approaching the edge of the Zirian system, Kim announced. Sensors are detecting multiple ship signatures and heavy weapons fire. Chin settled into her command chair and activated the fleet communication channel. All ships, this is Thunderbolt Actual. We go in fast, we hit hard, and we get those civilians out. Remember, this is what we trained for. This is what humans do. The 7 ships of Task Force 7 dropped out of warp at the edge of the Zirian system, their sensors immediately picking up the chaos of battle ahead. What they saw confirmed their worst fears and gave them hope at the same time. The enemy was unlike anything in Federation databases. Sleek, black ships that seemed to absorb light, moving with an alien grace that suggested technology far beyond anything the Federation possessed. But they were also outnumbered, facing the combined fleets of 3 different species, and they showed signs of damage from the prolonged battle. There, Walsh called out, pointing to her sensor display. I've got Serenity 7. She's hiding behind the 4th planet's moon, trying to stay out of the line of fire. Chin smiled grimly. The colony ship's captain was smart, using the moon as a shield while waiting for rescue. Now it was time for the human armada to show the galaxy what they could do. All ships, execute Plan Alpha. Let's bring our people home. The Thunderbolt and her escorts materialized in the heart of the battle zone, emerging from their micro-jumps directly among the wreckage of destroyed Altarian vessels. The enemy ships, caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of human vessels in their midst, hesitated for a crucial few seconds. Those seconds were all Captain Chen needed. Fire everything, she commanded. The human ships unleashed a devastating barrage at point-blank range. Plasma cannons, railguns, missile salvos, and energy weapons all fired simultaneously, their combined firepower concentrated on the nearest enemy vessel. The alien ship, sleek and black as the void itself, shuddered under the assault. But even as the human weapons struck home, Chen could see the enemy's adaptive technology beginning to work. The ship's hull, which had initially been torn apart by the railgun rounds, began to shimmer and shift. By the time the second volley arrived, the enemy's armor had already adapted, deflecting shots that should have punched clean through. "They're adapting faster than we thought," Rodriguez reported grimly. "Our weapons are losing effectiveness with each hit." "Then we don't give them time to adapt," Chen replied. "All ships, execute random targeting protocols. Don't let them lock onto any single weapon system." The human fleet scattered, each ship following its own erratic attack pattern. The Phoenix dove beneath the enemy formation, its pilot executing a series of rolls and turns that would have been impossible for larger vessels. The Scorpion used its electronic warfare suite to jam enemy sensors while raking their hulls with concentrated fire. The Defiance, massive and powerful, served as an anvil against which the smaller ships could drive their prey. Meanwhile, the three frigates raced toward the fourth planet's moon, where Serenity 7 waited in hiding. Captain Chun watched their progress on her tactical display while directing her own ship's attack on the enemy fleet. Captain Williams, to Thunderbolt, came the voice of the Phoenix's commander. "I'm seeing something weird here. These enemy ships, they're not just adapting to our weapons. They're adapting to our tactics too." Chun frowned, studying her sensor readings more carefully. Williams was right. The enemy vessels had initially been caught off guard by the human attack patterns, but now they were beginning to anticipate the human ship's movements. It was as if they were learning not just the technology, but the thinking patterns of their opponents. "All ships, switch to pattern Delta," Chen ordered. Completely random movements, no predictable sequences. But even as her ships began executing chaotic attack runs, Chen realized they were fighting a losing battle. The enemy technology wasn't just adaptive. It was learning at an exponential rate. What had started as a successful surprise attack was rapidly becoming a nightmare. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Falcon," Torres announced. "They've reached the colony ship. Put them through." Captain Morrison's face appeared on the screen, his expression tense. "Chen, we got a problem. Serenity 7 is badly damaged. Their engines are offline, and they've got hull breaches on 12 decks. They can't evacuate under their own power." Chen's mind raced. The original plan had called for the colony ship to make its own escape while the human fleet kept the enemy busy. But if Serenity 7 couldn't move, they would need to find another way to extract 15,000 civilians from a war zone. "Morrison, can your ships provide tow assistance?" "Negative. The colony ship is too massive for our tractor beams. We need something with a lot more power." Chen looked at her tactical display, watching as her ships continued their desperate dance with the enemy fleet. The aliens were adapting to every attack, every maneuver, every tactic the humans threw at them. In a few more minutes, the human weapons would be completely ineffective, unless they tried something completely different. "Rodriguez, I want you to prepare a spread of nuclear warheads," she ordered. "Not the tactical ones. The big ones." Her weapons officer looked shocked. "Captain, those are city killers. We've never used them in ship-to-ship combat." "Exactly. The enemy has been adapting to our conventional weapons. Let's see how they handle something they've never encountered before." The use of nuclear weapons in space combat was considered barbaric by most Federation species. The weapons were messy, dangerous, and difficult to control. But Humans have been using nuclear weapons for centuries, and they understood their devastating potential better than anyone else in the galaxy. Captain Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's science officer, spoke up from her station. If we detonate nuclear weapons at close range, the electromagnetic pulse could disable our own systems. Then, we'll have to make sure we're not at close range when they go off, Chen replied. All ships, prepare for emergency jump. On my mark, we're going to plan our presence and get out of here. The human ships regrouped, forming a tight formation as they approached the main enemy vessel. The alien ship, confident in its adaptive defenses, moved to intercept them. Its weapons, now perfectly calibrated to counter human technology, began charging for what its commanders believed would be a decisive strike. They were about to learn that humans had more than one way of solving problems. Fire, Chen commanded. 6 nuclear warheads shot out from the human ships, each one programmed to detonate at a specific distance from the enemy vessels. The alien ships immediately began adapting their defenses, their hulls shifting and changing to absorb the energy of the approaching weapons. But nuclear weapons didn't work the way conventional space weapons did. They didn't rely on kinetic energy or focused beams. They simply released the fundamental forces of the universe in a concentrated burst of destruction. All ships, emergency jump in 3, 2, 1 mark. The human fleet vanished just as the first warhead detonated. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star, followed seconds later by 5 more detonations. The enemy ships, caught in the overlapping fields of nuclear fire, simply ceased to exist. The human fleet reappeared at the edge of the system, their crews cheering as they watched the enemy formation dissolve into expanding clouds of plasma and debris. But Chen's attention was focused on the remaining enemy vessels, the ones that had been far enough away to survive the nuclear attack. Status report, she called out. Thunderbolt is green across the board. Chief Engineer Okafor reported. Minor radiation exposure, but nothing our shields can't handle. Phoenix reporting all systems normal, Captain Williams added. One by one, the other ships checked in. They had all survived the nuclear attack, but Chen knew their victory was only temporary. The surviving enemy ships were already regrouping, and their adaptive technology would ensure that nuclear weapons would be useless in any future engagement. Captain Morrison, status on the colony ship evacuation? We're working on it, Chun. The Eagle and Hawk are setting up to provide power to Serenity 7's damaged systems. If we can get their engines online, we might be able to get them out of here. Chen studied her tactical display, counting the remaining enemy vessels. There were still 4 of them, and they were moving toward the 4th planet's moon where the colony ship waited. The human fleet had bought time with their nuclear attack, but time was running out. All ships, form up on the Defiance, she ordered. We're going back in. Captain, Dr. Kim spoke up again. The enemy will have adapted to our nuclear weapons by now. They won't work a second time. Chen smiled grimly. Then, we'll have to try something else. The human ships accelerated toward the 4th planet, racing to reach the colony ship before the enemy could complete their advance. Behind them, at the edge of the system, new contacts appeared on sensors. The main body of the human Armada's 3rd fleet had finally arrived, along with additional vessels from the other Federation species. But Chen knew that by the time those reinforcements could reach the battle zone, the fate of 15,000 civilians would already be decided. It was up to her small task force to hold the line until help could arrive. Captain, the enemy ships are moving faster now, Rodriguez reported. They'll reach the moon in 12 minutes. Time to evacuation readiness. Morrison's voice crackled over the comm, 15 minutes minimum. Serenity 7's engines are in worse shape than we thought. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, running calculations in her head. For enemy ships, with adaptive technology, against 7 human vessels with limited ammunition and no element of surprise. The math was not encouraging, but humans had never been good at math when lives were on the line. All ships, this is Chun. We're going to buy Morrison's team the time they need. Whatever it takes. Captain Brooks of the Defiance spoke for all of them when he replied, Roger that, Chun. Let's show these bastards what happens when they mess with human civilians. The 7 ships of Task Force 7 formed up in a defensive formation around the 4th planet's moon, their weapons trained on the approaching enemy vessels. In the distance, The massive forms of Admiral Harrison's reinforcement fleet grew larger on sensors, racing to join the battle. The final confrontation was about to begin. The 4 remaining enemy ships approached the moon with the confidence of predators closing in on wounded prey. Their sleek black hulls had already adapted to the nuclear weapons the humans had used, their surfaces now rippling with energy fields designed to dissipate atomic fire. They moved in perfect formation, their adaptive technology having learned from every aspect of the previous engagement. Captain Chun watched them approach on her tactical display, her mind working through increasingly desperate scenarios. Conventional weapons would be useless now. The enemy had seen everything the human fleet could throw at them and had adapted accordingly. Nuclear weapons were off the table. What else did humans have? Captain, Chief Engineer Okafor's voice came through the comm. I've been thinking about this adaptive technology. It has to have limits, right? I mean, no system can adapt to everything. Chin's eyes lit up. Go on, Chief. Well, their technology adapts to whatever we use against them. But what if we don't actually use anything against them? What if we use the environment itself? Explain. This moon we're hiding behind, it's got a molten core. High iron content, strong magnetic field. If we could destabilize that magnetic field, create a magnetic pulse. Chun understood immediately. A magnetic pulse wouldn't be a weapon in the traditional sense. It would be a natural phenomenon, something the enemy's adaptive technology might not be able to counter because it wasn't actually an attack. How we destabilize the magnetic field? We need to overload the moon's core with energy. A lot of energy delivered all at once. If we rigged our warp cores to create a feedback loop. Chief, are you suggesting we sacrifice our ships? There was a pause before Okafor replied. Not all of them, Captain. Just one. And not the whole ship, just the warp core. We could eject it, program it to overload when it reaches the moon's core. Chun looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These people had volunteered to serve, knowing that their duty might one day require the ultimate sacrifice. But asking them to destroy their own ship to save strangers was asking a lot, even for humans. Captain Morrison to Thunderbolt. The frigate captain's voice interrupted her thoughts. We've got partial power to Serenity 7's engines, but it's not enough. The colony ship is just too big to move quickly. We need at least 10 more minutes. 10 minutes. The enemy ships would reach them in 6. Rodriguez, Chin said quietly. Prepare to eject the warp core. Set it for maximum overload. Her weapons officer looked shocked. Captain, if we lose the warp core, we're dead in space. No way to escape if this doesn't work. Then, we better make sure it works. Chun opened a channel to all ships in the task force. This is Chun. I'm about to attempt something that's never been tried before. We're going to use the moon's magnetic field as a weapon. It'll require sacrificing the Thunderbolt's warp drive, but it might be our only chance. Captain Williams of the Phoenix responded immediately. Chun, let me do it. The Phoenix is smaller. My warp core won't create as big a pulse. Negative, Williams. We need maximum effect, and the Thunderbolt has the most powerful warp drive in the formation. Captain Brooks joined the conversation. Chun, the Defiance has the biggest warp core in the fleet. If we're doing this, let me take the hit. For a moment, Chun felt a surge of pride in her fellow captains. Even facing impossible odds, they were arguing over who would make the sacrifice. That was the human way. When someone had to pay the price, everyone volunteered. Negative to all, she decided. The Thunderbolt is best positioned for the attack run. Besides, I've got the most experience with unconventional tactics. The truth was, Chen had made her decision based on cold military logic. The Thunderbolt was indeed best positioned, and her crew was the most experienced with dangerous maneuvers. But there was another reason, one she kept to herself. As the task force commander, the responsibility for this desperate gambit was hers alone. All ships provide covering fire for the Thunderbolt's attack run. Keep those enemy ships busy while we set up for the magnetic pulse. Shin turned to her helmsman. Park, I need you to plot a course that takes us directly over the moon's north pole. Thread the needle between those two enemy ships, then dive straight down to the surface. Ensign Park's face was pale, but his voice was steady. Aye, Captain. Plotting course now. Chief, how much time do you need to prep the warp core for ejection? 2 minutes, Captain. But I want to go on record as saying this is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. Noted, Chief. But crazy is what we do best. The Thunderbolt accelerated toward the enemy formation, her escorts spreading out to provide maximum distraction. The alien ships immediately focused their fire on the approaching human vessel, their adapted weapons systems tracking the ship's movements with deadly precision. But Chun had one more trick up her sleeve. As the enemy fire began to find its target, she ordered a maneuver that no sane captain would attempt in a combat situation. Park, initiate a controlled spin. Use our rotation to spread the damage across the hull. The Thunderbolt began to tumble end over end, presenting a constantly changing target to the enemy weapons. The ship's artificial gravity systems screamed in protest, and several crew members were thrown against their restraints, but the maneuver worked. The enemy fire, perfectly calibrated for a stable target, was scattered across the ship's surface instead of focusing on critical systems. Approaching the moon's north pole, Park reported through gritted teeth. Beginning descent. The Thunderbolt plunged toward the lunar surface, its hull heating up as it entered the thin atmosphere. Behind them, the enemy ships followed, their adaptive technology analyzing the human ship's flight path and adjusting their weapons accordingly. Warp core ejection system ready, Chief Okafor announced. Core is programmed to overload 30 seconds after ejection. Do it, Chief. The Thunderbolt shuddered as its warp core was ejected, the massive cylinder of exotic matter and energy conduits tumbling toward the moon's surface. The ship immediately began losing power as auxiliary systems kicked in, but they would have enough energy for a few more minutes of flight. The warp core struck the lunar surface and burrowed deep into the crust, its exotic matter beginning to interact with the moon's iron core in ways that no one had ever attempted before. The enemy ships, confused by the human vessel's apparent suicide dive, hesitated for a crucial moment. That hesitation saved Chen's life. The magnetic pulse erupted from the moon's core like an invisible wave of destruction. It wasn't an electromagnetic pulse in the traditional sense, but something far more fundamental, a disruption in the basic magnetic fields that held matter together at the quantum level. The enemy ships, their hulls still adapted to resist nuclear fire, and conventional weapons, had no defense against this type of attack. Their adaptive technology tried to compensate, but there was nothing to adapt to. The magnetic pulse simply tore their molecular structure apart at the most basic level. Chun watched in amazement as the 4 enemy vessels simply dissolved, their matter scattered across space as their atomic bonds were disrupted. The alien ships that had seemed invincible moments before were reduced to clouds of component atoms. Holy hell, Rodriguez whispered. It actually worked, but the celebration was short-lived. The Thunderbolt, caught on the edge of the magnetic pulse, was also affected. Systems began failing throughout the ship as the exotic energies interfered with their electronics. Chief, I need power, Chen called out. Working on it, Captain. The backup fusion reactors are online, but we're running at 15% of normal power. And, Captain, we've got another problem. What now? The magnetic pulse destabilized the moon's orbit. It's starting to break apart. Chen looked at the tactical display and saw that Okafor was right. The moon was developing massive cracks across its surface, and chunks of rock were already breaking away. In a few minutes, the entire satellite would disintegrate, taking the colony ship with it. Morrison, status on the evacuation? Serenity 7's engines are online. We're moving away from the moon now, but we're only making quarter impulse. At this speed, we'll be caught in the debris field when the moon breaks up. Chen made a quick calculation. The colony ship was too slow to escape on its own, and the human frigates didn't have enough power to tow it to safety. But there might be another way. All ships, form up on Serenity 7. We're going to push them out of here. Captain Williams sounded confused. Chun, our ships don't have tractor beams powerful enough to move something that big. We're not going to pull them, Williams. We're going to push them. All ships, assume position at Serenity 7's stern. We're going to use our impulse drives to add to their acceleration. It was another insane plan, the kind of desperate improvisation that had defined human space combat since the first ships left Earth's orbit. 7 military vessels, designed for war, would serve as tugboats for a massive civilian transport. The human ships moved into position behind the colony's ship, their impulse drives adding their thrust to Serenity 7's struggling engines. Slowly, painfully, the massive vessel began to accelerate away from the disintegrating moon. "It's working," Morrison reported. "We're up to half impulse and climbing." Behind them, the moon finally succumbed to the magnetic forces that had torn it apart. Massive chunks of rock flew in all directions, some of them large enough to destroy a ship. But the human fleet and their precious cargo were already beyond the danger zone, limping toward the edge of the system where Admiral Harrison's reinforcement fleet waited. As they cleared the debris field, Chen finally allowed herself to believe they had succeeded. 15,000 civilians were safe, the enemy fleet was destroyed, and the human armada had proven once again that there was no challenge too great, no odds too long, when human lives were on the line. "Captain," Torres announced, "incoming transmission from Admiral Harrison." The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, his expression a mixture of relief and amazement. "Captain Shun, I've been monitoring your engagement. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most reckless. I'm still trying to decide which." Shin smiled tiredly. "Maybe both, sir. But it got the job done." "Indeed it did. The entire Federation fleet is talking about what happened here today. Word is already spreading about how the human armada destroyed an unknown enemy using a lunar magnetic pulse. I don't think anyone's going to question human tactics for a while." As the rescue fleet surrounded the colony ship and began coordinating the transfer of medical supplies and engineering teams, Chen looked out at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, other threats waited. Other challenges that would test the limits of human courage and ingenuity. But today, humanity had proven something important. When faced with the impossible, when conventional tactics failed, when hope seemed lost, humans found a way. They always found a way. 3 weeks after the Battle of Zirion, Captain Shin stood in the observation deck of Starbase Meridian, watching as the UES Thunderbolt underwent repairs in the massive orbital facility. The ship's hull bore the scars of battle, but her crew had survived, and that was what mattered most. The rescue of Serenity 7 had become legendary throughout Federation space. The story of how a small human task force had destroyed an enemy with superior adaptive technology using an improvised magnetic pulse weapon had spread to every corner of the galaxy. But Chen knew that the real victory wasn't in the tactical innovation or the successful rescue mission. The real victory was in what had happened afterward. "Admiral Harrison told me I'd find you here," a voice said behind her. Chun turned to see Admiral Thyros, the Altarian fleet commander who had led the first response to the distress call. The tall, blue-skinned alien moved with the careful grace of his species, but Chun could see something different in his bearing. "Admiral Thyros, I was hoping to speak with you before you departed." The Altarian joined her at the observation window, looking out at the repair work in progress. "Captain Chun, I owe you an apology." Chun raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For underestimating your species. For assuming that human aggression was a weakness rather than a strength." Thyros paused, his large black eyes reflecting the starlight. "My fleet was defeated by an enemy we could not understand. We tried to fight them according to our principles, with honor and dignity and careful strategy. We failed. You saved thousands of lives before we arrived," Chen pointed out. "Your ships held the line long enough for the colony's ship to find shelter. Perhaps. But we could not adapt to an enemy that adapted to us. We fought as we had always fought, and it was not enough." Thyros turned to face her directly. "Your species did what mine could not. You found a way to win against impossible odds." Chen considered her words carefully. The relationship between humans and the other Federation species had always been delicate. Human military doctrine was viewed with suspicion by many alien cultures, who saw human willingness to take risks and use overwhelming force as signs of primitive barbarism. "Admiral, we didn't win because we're better warriors. We won because we were willing to try something that had never been attempted before. Sometimes that's what victory requires." "Yes, but that is precisely my point. My species would have spent days analyzing the theoretical implications of such an action. We would have formed committees to study the risks and potential outcomes. By the time we reached a decision, everyone would have been dead. Thyros gestured toward the damaged human ship in the dock below. Your captain sacrificed her own vessel's warp drive based on an untested theory. She risked not just her own life, but the lives of her entire crew on the possibility that it might work. That kind of decision-making is alien to us. Chen nodded. It was an old debate within Federation military circles. The Altarians preferred careful planning and overwhelming defensive positions. The Zentari relied on speed and maneuverability, avoiding direct confrontation whenever possible. The Crystalline Collective used their advanced technology to maintain distance from their enemies, striking from long range with devastating precision. But humans fought differently. They improvised. They took risks. They were willing to sacrifice themselves for others, even strangers from alien species. It was an approach that many Federation species found difficult to understand. Admiral, there's something you should know about what happened at Zirion, Chen said. We're still analyzing the enemy ships we destroyed, trying to figure out where they came from and how their technology worked. Have you learned anything useful? Chen's expression became grim. Too much. The adaptive technology wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. If these ships had been given more time to analyze our tactics, they could have become unstoppable. More importantly, the wreckage suggests that this was just a scouting force. Thyros felt a chill of recognition. You believe there are more of them? Our intelligence analysts think we're looking at the advance guard of a much larger invasion fleet. The ships we faced at Zirion were gathering data about Federation military capabilities. They were learning how we fight so they could develop counters for our tactics. The implications were staggering. If the enemy had adaptive technology that could counter any known weapon or strategy, a larger invasion force would be nearly impossible to defeat using conventional methods. Every Federation species would need to find new ways of thinking about warfare. What does this mean for the Federation? Thyros asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching as repair crews worked on the Thunderbolt's battle damage. Finally, she spoke. It means that the old ways of doing things aren't going to be enough. Every species in the Federation is going to have to learn to think differently, to take risks they've never taken before. The enemy's greatest weapon isn't their adaptive technology. It's their ability to learn from our predictability. And humans are anything but predictable. Exactly. But we can't defend the entire galaxy by ourselves. We need the Altarian defensive expertise, the Zentari mobility, the crystalline long-range capabilities. What we need is for everyone to start thinking more creatively. Thyros considered this. You're suggesting that other species learn to fight more like humans. I'm suggesting that we all learn to fight less like ourselves, Chen corrected. The enemy adapts to whatever we throw at them. If we always respond the same way, if we always use the same tactics, they'll eventually find counters for everything we have. A new voice joined their conversation, which is why the Federation Council has approved some rather dramatic changes to our military structure. Chen and Thyros turned to see Admiral Harrison approaching, his expression serious but determined. Behind him walked several other figures. Admiral Vextar of the Zentari Merchant Fleet, Crystalline Matrix Commander Zarthon, and General Morrison of the Federation Marine Corps. Admiral Harrison, Chen said, surprised to see so many senior officers together. I wasn't expecting you. Emergency session of the Joint Chiefs, Harrison explained. We've been analyzing the intelligence from Zirion, and the picture isn't pretty. Captain Shun is right about this being an advanced scout. Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures moving toward Federation space from beyond the galactic rim. Admiral Vextar, a small reptilian being with bright yellow scales, spoke up. The enemy fleet appears to be at least 50 times larger than the force encountered at Zirion. Our current defensive strategies would be inadequate against such numbers, particularly if they possess the same adaptive capabilities. Commander Zarthon's crystalline form chimed melodically as it communicated through harmonic frequencies that were translated by universal communicators. Analysis of enemy wreckage confirms exponential learning curves. Each engagement increases their tactical database geometrically. Conventional response protocols indicate probability of victory approaches zero. Chun felt the weight of the implications settling on her shoulders. "What are you proposing?" General Morrison, a grizzled human veteran who had served in conflicts across 3 sectors, smiled grimly. "We're proposing something that's never been tried before in Federation history. A complete integration of all military forces under a unified command structure, with tactical doctrine based on human improvisation principles. You want to teach the entire Federation military to fight like humans?" "Not exactly," Admiral Harrison clarified. "We want to combine the best aspects of every species' military doctrine into something new. Altarian defensive strength, Centauri mobility, crystalline long-range precision, and human adaptability. The enemy can adapt to any single approach, but if we constantly shift between different tactical philosophies, they'll never be able to predict what we're going to do next," Chin finished. Admiral Thyros looked thoughtful. "It would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have fought independently for millennia. Many of my people would resist taking orders from human commanders, and many humans would resist following Altarian defensive protocols," Harrison admitted. "But the alternative is watching the Federation fall to an enemy that can counter everything we throw at them individually." Chun studied the faces around her, seeing the same determination that had driven her crew during the desperate battle at Zirion. These were military leaders from different species, different cultures, different worlds. But they all understood that survival sometimes required doing things that had never been done before. "What would this unified command structure look like?" she asked. Morrison pulled out a tactical display showing the proposed organizational chart. Mixed species crews on all vessels. Human tactical officers serving under Altarian captains. Centauri pilots flying crystalline long-range fighters. Every ship, every unit, every squadron would be a blend of different approaches to warfare. "The enemy's adaptive technology works by analyzing patterns," Vextar added. "If there are no consistent patterns to analyze, their greatest advantage becomes worthless." Shin looked out at the Thunderbolt again, thinking about her crew and the sacrifices they had made at Zirion. They had won that battle through improvisation and desperate courage, but the next fight would require something more. It would require unity on a scale the galaxy had never seen before. "When do we start?" she asked. "Immediately," Harrison replied. "The enemy fleet will reach Federation space in approximately 6 months. We have that long to revolutionize the way the galaxy thinks about warfare." As the group of senior officers began discussing the details of the most ambitious military reorganization in galactic history, Chin felt a familiar sensation in her stomach. It was the same feeling she had experienced before every major challenge of her career, a mixture of fear and anticipation that told her she was about to attempt something that would test every limit of her abilities. But this time, it wasn't just her life or her crew's lives on the line. It was the survival of every species in the Federation, every world that believed in peace and cooperation over conquest and destruction. The human Armada had proven at Zirion that sometimes the impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. Now, they would have to prove it again, on a scale that would determine the fate of the galaxy itself. The real war was just beginning.